Welcome back to the Poets Dating Game. Today, our contestant is going to try to figure out her perfect poem by asking poets about their poems that they have written from the Civil Rights Movement. Let's get to it!
First question is for Poet 1. What literary device would you put into your poem and why?
I will put parallel structure in my poem in lines 23 and 24 saying keep fighting and marching, and line 31 saying learning, voting, walking, and writing, to emphasize that the Civil Rights Movement took a lot of repetitive action through the use of action verbs.
Alright, the same question goes for Poet number 2.
I would use a metaphor in line 18, and it would say, I am born as the South explodes. This is a metaphor because it refers to the actions in the civil rights as a bomb exploding to show how the Civil Rights Movement in the South caused mass panic, chaos, and disorder, just like a bomb would.
Wow, I really like the metaphor of a bomb. Alright, so Poet number 3, if you could add a formatting choice, what would it be?
In lines 3 to 5, I would add noticeable spacing saying a country caught between black and white to demonstrate the space between blacks and whites in society.
Okay, my next question is for Poet number 1 again. If you could connect your chosen literary device to a historical event, what would it be?
I would actually connect the use of parallel structure to 3 historical concepts. In line 31 to 32, I said learning, voting, walking, and writing whenever we want. The idea of learning connects to school segregation and the inability to learn in the same facilities as white children. Voting connects to Jim Crow laws and the ways that whites kept African Americans from voting, like the literacy test. And walking and writing refers to how the buses were not fair and the African Americans and whites had different sections in the buses. This was protested by the Montgomery bus boycotts and the Freedom Rides.
Alright, so Poet number 2, if you could connect to a historical concept of the civil rights, what would it be?
I would connect my poem to a concept of before the civil rights in lines 9 to 13, saying, my great-great-grandparents worked the deep rich lands unfree, dusk till dawn unpaid. It would connect to slavery to show how this is a precursor to the civil rights and how blacks are not treated as humans.
Alright, Poet number 3, same question goes to you.
I'd also connect my historical connection to before the civil rights movement in line 20 of my poem saying, enslaved then emancipated. I'd mention emancipation to show how the blacks are freed by Lincoln. However, in contrast, I would follow enslaved by emancipated with but not free in line 21. The irony of being emancipated but not free demonstrates the fact that although they were freed from slavery, the African Americans were still treated like slaves because the white people didn't see them as equals. Malcolm X connects this concept in one of his speeches by saying that just because the African Americans were in America, it didn't make them American.
Alright, another question for Poet number 3. If you were to title your poem after a date, what date would you choose?
I would choose February 12th, 1963. This would be for a few reasons. First, because it was my birthday, which I happened to share with President Lincoln. It also happened to be 100 years since Lincoln freed the slaves in the Emancipation Proclamation. Because of this, the White House hosted a dinner on February 12th, 1963, with all of the African American leadership in the entire nation. 1,100 people attended. And I would choose this title to reflect how things in America were changing in the Civil Rights Movement since the day that I was born.
Alright, this is my last question for Poet number 1. If your poetry were to connect with the poetry of someone else, who would it be?
That's easy. My poetry could connect to Dennis Brutus's. In lines 15 to 17 of my poem, the lines would say, looked up and followed the sky's mirrored constellation to freedom. This connects to several of Brutus's poems that mention stars as a symbol of freedom, such as Cold in 17. Another line of my poem could connect to cold as well, because line 14 of my poem says, drank cool water from scooped gourds. This connects to cold when it says, we sit on concrete, stuff with our fingers the sugarless pap into our mouths. Because both of these lines focus on the reduction of humanity at the hands of people who feel that they're in power, both in South Africa with the apartheid system and America during slavery.
Oh, if I had cold from IOC, I should have used that. Well, thank you all for your time and answering all my questions.
Alright, now that you've had the chance to ask questions, which poem do you think is your perfect fit?
Oh, that's really hard. They all have such great aspects. Why can't I just choose them all?
Lucky for you, you can choose them all. We actually only had one poet here today you were asking questions to.
Wait, so all those answers came from the same poet?
Yep. Jacquelyn Woodson is the author of the poem February 12th, 1963, and all of those questions pertain to her poem.
That's so cool. I love this poem and all the poet incorporated.
Yeah, we knew you would, and that's why we chose it for you. Well, that's all for today. Thanks for playing!